January 24, 1989. 4:50 in the morning. A tray slides through the slot of a cell at Florida State Prison. Steak, eggs, hash browns, toast. The standard last meal for a man who refused to choose. The food sits there, untouched, growing cold. In a few hours, Theodore Bundy will be dead. He knows the exact time. 7:06 a.m. But right now, in this quiet moment, what's going through his mind? For nearly a decade, he's lived on death row. 10 years of appeals. 10 years of confessions traded like currency for more time. 10 years of claiming he found God. But now time has run out. Outside these walls, more than 500 people are gathering in the cold Florida night. They're holding signs, chanting, "Burn, Bundy, burn." They scream into the darkness. They want justice. They want closure. They want him gone. Inside this cell, Ted Bundy sits alone with his thoughts. A Methodist minister has been praying outside his door all night. His mother called him twice this morning, her voice breaking as she told him, "You'll always be my precious son." Does he feel remorse? Fear? Or is this just another performance from a man who spent his entire life manipulating everyone around him? What goes through your mind when you know death is exactly 2 hours away? Here's what most people don't know about Ted Bundy's final hours. Even facing the electric chair, even after confessing to 30 murders, he never stopped playing games. Right until the end, he was still trying to control the narrative. Still deflecting blame. Still manipulating. And what happened in those final 24 hours reveals something chilling about the nature of true evil, and how it refuses to take accountability even in death. Before we go deeper into those final hours, you need to understand who Ted Bundy really was. On the surface, he was everything society told us to trust. A law student. Handsome. Well-spoken. He volunteered at a suicide prevention hotline, talking people off the ledge. He worked on political campaigns. He had friends who genuinely liked him. But underneath that carefully crafted mask lived something else entirely. Between 1974 and 1978, Ted Bundy murdered at least 30 young women across 7 states. Some experts believe the real number could be over 100. He didn't just kill them. He hunted them. Bundy's life began with a lie that shaped everything. Born Theodore Robert Cowell in 1946, he grew up believing his grandparents were his parents and his mother was his sister. When he discovered the truth about his illegitimate birth, it shattered something fundamental in him. That deception became a template. If his entire childhood was a performance, why not make his whole life one? He graduated from the University of Washington with a psychology degree in 1972. He got accepted to law school in Utah. He dated. He smiled. He blended in perfectly. All while planning his next kill. His method was devastatingly simple. He'd wear a fake cast or use crutches, approach young women in parking lots or on campus, and ask for help carrying books to his car. Sometimes he pretended to be a police officer. These women weren't naive. They were kind. Their compassion became their death sentence. Once he got them isolated, the mask dropped. He kidnapped them, raped them, murdered them, often in that order. And here's what's truly chilling. He didn't fit the profile police were looking for. Clean-cut law student with no criminal record? No way he could be a killer. That assumption kept him free for years. Even when he was caught, Bundy's audacity didn't stop. In 1975, he was arrested for kidnapping Carol Duranch, one of the few women who escaped. He was convicted and jailed. Most people would accept defeat. Not Bundy. He escaped from custody. Twice. The first time, in June 1977, he jumped out of a courthouse library window while acting as his own lawyer. Caught 8 days later. 6 months after that, in December 1977, he escaped again, this time making it all the way to Florida. That second escape would lead to his most brutal crimes yet. And ultimately his execution. On January 15, 1978, just 2 weeks after escaping, Bundy broke into the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University. In less than 15 minutes, he attacked 4 young women with a piece of firewood, killing 2, Margaret Bowman and Lisa Levy. More than 30 people were in that house. No one heard a thing. 3 weeks later, he kidnapped and murdered 12-year-old Kimberly Leach. His reign of terror was finally over when police pulled him over for erratic driving in a stolen vehicle. Have you ever met someone who seemed too good to be true? Someone whose charm felt off? Drop a comment below. I want to hear your stories. And if you're finding this story as chilling as I am, hit that like button. July 24, 1979. The verdict came down. Guilty on all counts for the Chi Omega murders. Ted Bundy was sentenced to die in Florida's electric chair. Then came February 12, 1980. Another death sentence for the murder of 12-year-old Kimberly Leach. Most condemned prisoners accept their fate at this point. They prepare themselves spiritually. They make peace with what's coming. Not Bundy. For him, those death sentences became a challenge, a game to see how long he could delay the inevitable. What followed was nearly a decade of legal manipulation, false confessions, and psychological warfare. Bundy's time on death row at Florida State Prison wasn't about redemption. It was about survival. He became a master at trading bones for time. He'd offer to confess to unsolved murders in exchange for delays in his execution date. Give investigators just enough information to keep them interested. Promise more details if they just give him a little more time. It worked. Again and again. Between February 1986 and January 1989, Florida Governor Bob Graham signed multiple death warrants. Each time, Bundy's lawyers filed appeals. The U.S. Supreme Court granted stays. Execution dates came and went. The families of his victims watched and waited. During these years, something interesting happened. Bundy claimed he found God. He spent time with religious counselors. Read the Bible. Talked about redemption and forgiveness. He formed a close relationship with Methodist minister Fred Lawrence, who became his spiritual advisor. His mother, Louise, desperately wanted to believe her son had changed. She'd stood by him through everything, the arrests, the trials, the convictions. She pled with the courts, citing her Christian beliefs that the state shouldn't play God. Was this transformation real? Or was it just another mask, another way to manipulate people's sympathy? Here's what we know. Bundy kept playing games right up until the end. In January 1989, with his final execution date set for January 24, he suddenly became cooperative. Over several days, he confessed to FBI Special Agent Bill Hagmaier about 30 murders across 7 states: California, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Utah, Colorado, and Florida. But even these confessions were strategic. He admitted to crimes where he thought it might buy him time. He withheld details about others. He led investigators on. Governor Bob Martinez saw through it. When Bundy's intermediaries offered more confessions in exchange for delaying the execution, Martinez refused. Time had finally run out. Think about what this means. For 10 years, Bundy controlled the narrative. He decided when to talk and when to stay silent. He manipulated the legal system with appeals and delays. He used religion as a shield. He traded victims' names like bargaining chips. The families of Lisa Levy, Margaret Bowman, Kimberly Leach, and at least 27 other young women had to watch this man game the system year after year. This is what manipulation looks like in its purest form. Someone who refuses to accept responsibility, who uses every tool available to avoid consequences, who never stops performing. Even when death row should have been his reckoning, Bundy found a way to make it about him. January 23, 1989. Less than 24 hours before his scheduled execution. Most people in Bundy's position would be praying, reflecting, seeking genuine peace with their maker. Instead, Bundy granted one final interview. Not to FBI profiler Bill Hagmaier, who'd spent over 200 hours interviewing him since 1984. Not to the investigators still searching for bodies. No. This interview was with Dr. James Dobson, a conservative Christian evangelical psychologist and founder of Focus on the Family. Why him? Why now? Because Ted Bundy had one last card to play. One final manipulation. And this one would be his most calculated yet. During that interview, recorded on videotape just hours before his death, Bundy made a shocking claim. He blamed pornography. According to Bundy, his addiction to violent pornography was the fuel for his fantasies. He described how it started with softcore material, then progressed to harder content, until eventually he needed to act out what he saw. He said he was a victim. A good person corrupted by external forces beyond his control. He looked into the camera with tears in his eyes and warned parents about the dangers of pornography. It was convincing, emotional, seemingly heartfelt. It was also complete manipulation. Here's what Bundy was really doing, attempting to rewrite his legacy. Think about it. For 10 years, he'd confessed to brutally murdering at least 30 women. He described in graphic detail to FBI agent Bill Hagmaier how he decapitated approximately 6 victims. How he'd revisit the bodies. How the violence escalated with rage and intoxication. He'd demonstrated zero genuine remorse throughout hundreds of hours of interviews. But now, facing death, he wanted the world to remember him differently. Not as a monster who made calculated choices. As a victim himself. Someone led astray by society's failures. Dr. James Dobson accepted this narrative without challenge. The interview became ammunition for anti-pornography campaigns. Some people genuinely believed Bundy had finally told the truth about what made him kill. But experts saw through it immediately. Bundy had been studying criminal psychology since college. He knew exactly what answers would generate sympathy, what explanations would shift blame from his choices to external factors. This wasn't confession. It was deflection. After spending a decade manipulating the legal system with appeals, trading confessions for time, and using religion as a shield, Bundy's final act was to manipulate public perception. Even facing the electric chair, he couldn't stop performing. Here's why this matters. True remorse accepts responsibility. When someone genuinely regrets their actions, they don't make excuses. They don't blame external factors. They own what they've done. Bundy spent his last conscious hours doing the opposite. Pointing fingers, creating a narrative where he was corrupted rather than corrupt. The families of his victims saw this for what it was. Another slap in the face. Another refusal to give them the one thing they deserved. Acknowledgement that their daughters died because of his choices, not because of magazines or movies. This moment right here, this is where Bundy showed us who he really was, even facing death. What do you think? Was this genuine or the final con? Let me know in the comments, and make sure you're subscribed because we're going deeper into the psychology of manipulation in upcoming videos. The Dobson interview ended. The cameras were packed away. The manipulation was complete. Now came the waiting. January 23rd turned into January 24th. The final night of Ted Bundy's life. Inside his cell at Florida State Prison, Methodist minister Fred Lawrence pulled up a chair outside the bars. He'd been Bundy's spiritual advisor during these last years on death row. Now he would sit vigil through the darkness. Part of the time they spent in prayer, prison spokesman Bob McMaster later told reporters. What do you pray for when you're hours from death? Forgiveness? Peace? Courage? Or are you still calculating, still performing, still trying to control how people will remember you? While Bundy and Lawrence talked in hushed tones inside the prison walls, something else was happening outside. A crowd was gathering. By midnight, dozens of people had arrived at the prison entrance. By dawn there would be over 500. They brought signs, banners. Some held candles. But these weren't mourners. They weren't there to protest the execution. They were there to celebrate it. Burn, Bundy, burn, they chanted into the cold Florida night. Tuesday is Friday, read one sign. Vendors sold t-shirts. People set off fireworks. When the sun finally rose, the atmosphere felt less like a death watch and more like a tailgate party. This raises something uncomfortable we need to talk about. What does it say about us when we celebrate someone's death, even someone like Ted Bundy? The families of his victims had every right to feel relief, justice, closure. They'd waited over a decade for this moment. But what about everyone else? The strangers who traveled to watch a man die, who cheered, who made it into entertainment. Does seeking justice mean we have to become callous? When we celebrate death, any death, do we lose something of our own humanity? There's no easy answer here. Justice is complicated, especially when dealing with someone who showed his victims no mercy. Inside the prison, the machinery of execution was being tested. Prison staff checked the electric chair, nicknamed Old Sparky, making sure everything functioned properly. Electrodes, straps, the voltage regulator. 42 witnesses had been selected to watch through the glass partition. Among them, Jerry Blair, the prosecutor from the Kimberly Leach trial. Journalists, law enforcement officials, representatives from the victims' families. They would gather before dawn to watch the state of Florida end a life. This raises a difficult question. Is celebrating someone's execution justice, or does it make us no better than them? This isn't easy to answer. Share your thoughts below, and if this video is making you think, share it with someone who appreciates deep conversations. As the hours ticked by, Minister Lawrence kept his vigil. Did Bundy sleep that night? Did he reflect on the women he'd murdered? Did he think about Lisa Levy and Margaret Bowman, beaten to death in their sorority beds? About 12-year-old Kimberly Leach, whose body was found weeks later near the Suwannee River? Or was he thinking about his legacy? About that interview with Dobson? About how history would remember Theodore Robert Bundy? The truth is, we'll never really know what went through his mind that night. But we do know this. When morning came, he'd still be playing his final role, the remorseful sinner facing judgment. Even at the end, the mask stayed on. Outside the prison gates, the crowd erupted the moment they saw the signal from inside. Cheers. Applause. Someone waved an American flag. Another person lit off firecrackers. He was arrested for it, but that didn't stop the celebration. "This is a significant moment," said 26-year-old Carrie Harper from Gainesville. "Some of us waited 10 years for this day." Her friend, 21-year-old Janine Gordon, expressed what many felt. He believed he was so clever, so intelligent that he could evade justice. He mocked society during his trial with all his legal maneuvers and delays. The monster was gone. But the questions remained. For the families of Bundy's victims, that morning brought complicated emotions. Relief. Closure. Justice finally served after more than a decade of waiting. But it couldn't bring back Margaret Bowman or Lisa Levy, the Florida State students beaten to death in their beds. It couldn't undo the terror 12-year-old Kimberly Leach felt before Bundy murdered her. It couldn't give back the future stolen from at least 30 young women across 7 states. Jerry Blair, the prosecutor who convicted Bundy for Kimberly Leach's murder, was among the witnesses. He said Bundy nodded at him as they strapped him into the chair. "I think he was trying to convey that there were no hard feelings," Blair said later. Blair also admitted something that still haunts investigators and psychologists today: they never really understood what made Ted Bundy into a killer. "Ted Bundy was a complicated individual who went astray at some point," Blair said. "He murdered for the sheer thrill of it and the satisfaction of eluding law enforcement. He likely had the potential to achieve anything he aspired to, but something went awry, and we still don't understand what it was. That mystery is part of what makes Bundy's story so disturbing. He wasn't born a monster. He made choices. Calculated, deliberate choices to hunt, torture, and kill. But here's what we can learn from Ted Bundy's final hours, and from his entire story. First, charisma is not character. Bundy was handsome, educated, charming. He worked at a suicide hotline. He seemed trustworthy. His victims didn't ignore red flags. In many cases there weren't obvious ones. He weaponized social conditioning that teaches people, especially women, to be polite and helpful. Second, manipulation doesn't stop when someone gets caught. Bundy played games right up until the execution chamber. The Dobson interview. The strategic confessions. The religious conversion. Every move was calculated. True remorse accepts responsibility. Bundy never did. Third, and this is crucial, trust your instincts. Many of Bundy's victims later said they felt something was off, but dismissed it. Society teaches us not to be rude, not to make assumptions, to give people the benefit of the doubt. But your gut exists for a reason. If someone makes you uncomfortable, you don't owe them politeness. You don't owe them help. You don't owe them anything. Say no. Walk away. Create distance. Your safety is more important than someone else's feelings. Bundy's execution didn't bring his victims back. But their stories can protect others, if we're willing to learn from them. That's how we honor Lisa, Margaret, Kimberly, and all the others whose names we'll never know. So what do those final 24 hours of Ted Bundy's life teach us? They show us that manipulation doesn't stop just because someone faces consequences. Bundy spent his last hours on Earth doing what he'd done his entire life: controlling the narrative, deflecting blame, refusing accountability. The Dobson interview. The religious performance. The claim that pornography made him a killer. All of it was calculated. But those final hours also teach us something more important: how to recognize the warning signs that Bundy's victims missed, not because they were careless, but because he was skilled at exploiting social conditioning. Charm without character is dangerous. Charisma without conscience is deadly. And when someone makes you uncomfortable, you don't owe them your time, your help, or your politeness. Your instincts exist to protect you. Listen to them. Let me leave you with this. Ted Bundy died on January 24, 1989, at 7:16 a.m. But Lisa Levy, Margaret Bowman, Kimberly Leach, and at least 27 other young women died years before that. They died because one man chose violence over humanity, manipulation over honesty, power over compassion. We can't bring them back, but we can honor their memory by learning from their stories, by trusting our instincts, by teaching others to recognize manipulation, by refusing to be polite when our safety feels threatened. If this video impacted you, I need you to do 3 things. First, hit that like button so more people can learn these crucial lessons. Second, subscribe and turn on notifications because I'm committed to bringing you stories that matter and lessons that could save lives. And third, this is the most important one, share this video with someone you care about. These lessons about recognizing manipulation and trusting your instincts, they could make all the difference. What story should I cover next? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe out there.